and he knew us all. He knew our names. Then next to that shop was Conders, the leather merchants. They were not only leather merchants, they made buskins, as we called them. They were leggings, shaped like the man's calf and his ankle, and they went down the lower part of his leg and clipped up over his boot, and some of them were either laced or clipped. Wore them with breeches. They not only made those, they cut out leather for horses' collars, they also cut out leather for horses' reins, and they also cut out sides of leather from the cattle, which had a hole drilled in the shoulder end of it, with a cord through, and they hung up on hooks in their shop. It smelt of nothing but leather. That was E J Conders. Now, next to that, we had a lino shop, all coloured lino. Well, we called it canvas, because what it was a hard substance. It was rolled up all right, and it was stuck onto a hessian, which is like a satin. Well, once that was laid down, you kept it down, because if you attempted to get it up, it cracked and split everywhere. Well, they had that, and they had sold carpets and rugs, not that fitted rooms. You just bought rugs and doormats and carpets there. Well, next to that, you had the Lord Nelson. That's an old public house, not as old as the Neptune, but I would say even now, that's about 200 years old. At the back of that stood St Clement's Church. Right, we leave the Lord Nelson, which faced Salthouse Street, and the pork butchers. We got past that, and there was it had many uses. First it was a ladies' hairdresser's, then next it was a furniture shop, then next it was a dress shop. So that was nondescript shop. Next to that was the bars, the Fore Street bars, or slipper bars they call that, because when people went in that, they just paddled, hence the slipper bars. But after a while that was upgraded, and that was a public bars. Well, that had a wide frontage on that, from the front of the bars. I think that was built in 1908. From the front of the bars to the edge of the path to the road, that was all paving. Well, Saturday in particular, Wednesdays, but particular Saturdays, the fishermen in Ipswich, and there was some, the proper fishermen, take their nets down to the Orwell, go to Pin Mill, or out to the mouth of the Orwell. At night they'd go trawling, and they'd bring back flat, skate, eels.
Yes, but all the different kinds of fish.
All the different kinds of fish. And a trestle would be set up outside the bars, particularly Saturday morning, and all their fish was tipped out on these trestles. The path would be full of trestles, apart from space for people to walk. And they used to do a roaring trade there. You could get a dozen eels for sixpence. But I didn't mention about the shrimps. Well, the fishermen used to fish off Harwich, and they'd bring their shrimps from Harwich and bring them up in front of the bars. Well, the man who was selling the shrimp, he had a glass pint beer mug, and you asked for a pint of shrimps, he scooped them up with his hand, filled the mug right up to the top. What didn't keep on fell off, and you got your pint of shrimps, and they cost you twopence.
Well, then what was this side of the bars?
But after you'd got what you wanted, and there's some more left over, then there'd be some people come along who hadn't got many halfpennies to spare, and what was left over, that was sold to them cheaply. They then cleared up the site, left it nice and clean, and Sunday morning when you went out, you'll see all the trestles piled up against the bath's wall and neat and tidy. Well, beyond that was St Clement's Church Lane, that had a nice peal of bells in the church, and living close by we always used to look forward to hearing them play Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, and the church used to get crowded. Well, moving further on, there was a short, narrow lane. It was really narrow, and they had overhanging, they had houses either side, old-fashioned houses with overhangs. But if a man held a broomstick out of the window one side, reached over, and the other person in the other window, they could hold the hand of that broomstick, so they'd tell you how narrow it was. Now, the bath was one side of Angel Lane on the corner of the church lane, and the other side was a public house called the Lion and the Lamb. Well, I was too young to realise what that was. To me, that was just a timbered shop, heavily timbered, with oak beams all round it. You'd never driven an ordinary nail in it because it was too hard to have the bent. Anyhow, for a while that was empty. What then happened, a man came along who worked on one of the big yachts as a cook, and he opened a fish shop, and his name was Powell. I went to school with his 3 sons, and my sister went to school with his daughter, and he did a thriving business. He stayed there as long as ever I can remember. Well, next to that, there was a flower shop. That's right. There was a flower shop. Next to that one was Mr. Rudd, the picture framer, and he did a bit of painting himself, but he was a picture framer. I also went to school with his son. Next to that was Mrs. Mapley and her daughter. They kept the post office. Again, we used to take our pennies there and buy a penny stamp, and each folder, when we filled it up, was worth ½ a crown. So if we felt rich enough, we'd get a new book, and that ½ a crown would be transferred into another book with a ½ crown stamp, and we'd start again. Well, they were there for many years, and in end of 1991, I learned that the old lady had died, but her daughter, who never married, immigrated to Australia. Well, next to that was what we used to call a cheap jack grocers. They were called K's. But after a while they improved, and they sold a lot of good stuff cheap. They had big windows, and on Monday morning the manager used to come outside with a pot of whitening and a brush, and he'd paint all over those windows the cost of broken biscuits and coconut and sugar, anything in the grocery shop. They used to do a good trade there. They expanded, had a shop there, and had 1 or 2 shops in the town. They stayed in the town a long while. Next to that was George Gardner. He was a high-class sweet manufacturer. He specialised in boiled sweets, a lot of exotic sweets, and his office was in the front in Fore Street, and at the back was where his sugar was boiled, and all his product was sent to the shops round Ipswich. But the entrance of the back shop came at the end of Angel Lane. That was a tall building, 3-storey building, and the family themselves lived over the building. Well, that was Gardner's. They existed for a long while, but then the family died out, so did the business. Now next to that, we had as he was termed, oil and colour man, Mensmith, but we used to call them mincemeats. You went there, bought pegs, linen lines, props, linen baskets, woven linen baskets, paint, scrub brushes, everything household. Oh, and buy soda and yellow soap. Then you used to buy something that don't exist now, blue peas. They were little tiny shriveled up peas, ever so small they were, and you bought a pound of them, and it cost you twopence. You had split peas, you had lentils, all sorts of peas. But the blue peas, if you're going to have them for dinner the next day, you had to soak them at night. And you put them in a basin and filled that with water, with half the basin full of peas. When you came down the next morning, the water had gone, the peas had soaked it all up, and they were 4 times the size of what they were when you bought them. Well, as I said, you got everything there, paint, paraffin, the lot.